G'day, and welcome to another episode of Perth Property Insider. I'm your host, Jared Mann, and today for our New Year's Eve week, I'm bringing you a very special episode. It's the author of one of my favorite property investing books of all time, John Soforic, who wrote The Wealthy Gardener, and it goes into the life lessons on prosperity between a father and son. An absolutely wonderful and key book for every property investor to read. It's part story, part principles. It has sort of Eastern and Western philosophies in it. And today with John, I'm going to unpack some of those key principles and takeaways from the book and why I got so much out of it and think you will too. So let's go inside.
Welcome to Perth Property Insider, where you will learn how to grow your wealth and improve your life using Perth property. Our show is brought to you by Investors Edge Real Estate, the highly rated and award-winning property management specialists servicing the whole of Perth. Now, here is your host, Jared Mann.
G'day, John. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's an absolute honor because I was just saying to you, I've read your book at least 5 times, and I'd put it up there as one of the best property investing books for the next generation. And I don't say that lightly, especially when I started my journey with the likes of Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I'd actually put this up as being better than that. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Humbled, Jared. Humbled. Thank you so much. Seriously, when somebody says that kind of thing to me, it's what makes all the pain of a book worth it. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go into what The Wealthy Gardener is all about, some of its principles today, but let's start by having a bit of a chat about your background and upbringing, and it'd be just great to know what's behind the book.
Sure. I think what's most noteworthy with my past is that it's not very noteworthy. I came solidly from the middle class of America.
Yeah.
It was a small town outside of Pittsburgh based on a coal mining business. My upbringing was that my grandfather was a coal miner. The other was a farmer. My parents, they got together, got married, and bought a half of a trailer, not a full trailer. I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. I came out of college with $200,000 worth of student debt in today's dollars. So, I came out pretty well in a hole in a way that most of the people in my area couldn't fathom. And so, you look like a well-dressed young man, and I was a chiropractor. And you just can't see the story behind the story where you're really just working, and there's this big, enormous student debt that controls everything you do in life. So that was the 20s for me. And so I had to work my way out of it. I would say that's about the background that starts this conversation.
Yeah. And tell us a bit about The Wealthy Gardener and why you chose to write it, because you can tell as you read it that it's not just it was a labor of love. So
it was. It's a labor of love because it was written for my son way before this book was ever published. I would say that I've reached my financial goals before I turned 50. And at that time of my life, my son was just going to college. I had just reached my goals. And so it was time for me to know when enough is enough. And yet I saw him heading out the door, about ready to embark on his own journey. And it just felt like a calling to me to say, listen, this is what I know. And you're going to walk your own walk in life, but you might as well start from at least knowing the knowledge that I gained over all of my decades, and start there and then walk your own journey. And so I wrote The Wealthy Gardener. The subtitle is Lessons on Prosperity Between Father and Son. And it was a between father and son, no doubt about it. I would send things his way. He would argue back, sometimes question. We would go back and forth. It was a great period of our lives where he was in college and we connected in a way that, I'll always look back at that time and say that was a good couple of years.
And rather than just going with straight principles and, possibly losing readers in, how many there are, how many of those ingredients there are to creating wealth, what made you decide to write it in as a parable? So it's half story and half principles. I just love the way that it's delivered. Was that the intention all along, or?
Jared, I think
that
it's
come
really
about?
easy to write a dry recipe book on finance.
Yeah.
I also think it's necessary to, when you're speaking to your son, to tell stories, maybe,
Mm.
and that was the original intent. The greatest teachers of all time, not including myself in them, but it's saying that those greatest teachers of all time will oftentimes speak in parables. So you can come to your own conclusion and you just give people something to think about. I think sometimes that's the job of a writer, is to just break through the initial mindset of people so they can think differently. Sometimes stories will lead you to that. You'll see great, great teachers throughout history. They teach with parables, they teach with
Mm.
stories. I could tell you something in one step. It's not that hard. Or I could give you something to think about. And maybe I could give you the experience that I went through. And if you can get that, if I can convey that through a book, now
Certainly sticks with
my
you.
son, sticks with you, penetrates into you,
Yeah.
goes past your mind, maybe into the emotions. That's what you're after with
Exactly.
as a writer. Sure.
And I've
100%.
spent a fair bit of time lately delving into the subconscious on the show, and I even had my hypnotist on, believe it or not, that who did work with me with reprogramming my subconscious. And I think story, as you've alluded to, there's a fantastic way to start to reprogram our beliefs and just the ways that we
You're
think and our mindset. And yeah,
sure. Because it can penetrate past just the intellect. Like, there's the intellect, and then there's the subconscious that you're talking about. Now you're talking my language. I love these conversations because at a certain age, we have learned enough.
yeah,
It's not like we need tons more knowledge. Okay. We just need now to do the things we know to do. We don't need
Mm.
new things. We can't do the things we do. And so now you're talking about what is that power that some people have, that they just do things that they know they should do. And some of us will almost do things, and we will do things
yes,
consistently. And
yeah,
we
it's the
say we
difference,
want
isn't
this,
it?
and we absolutely.
So,
Now, what is that? Now you're talking subconscious in my mind. If you want to see what's in the subconscious mind, you just track a person's actions. Actions speak louder than words. And
mm.
then if you don't like your actions, now you go back to the subconscious mind. So I'm loving what you're just saying there. Yeah,
Well,
it's perfect.
in your book, you also talk about having the seeds of desire that motivate you. And, my seeds of desire were really strong from a young age because of my upbringing too. And my reasons for creating wealth have changed over time, as you do. But what were your seeds of desire to creating wealth, and how did they come about?
You know what, Jared, I know for a fact that everybody wants something and everybody fears something, right?
Mm.
Let's just start right there. And all I knew was I was so trapped in my 20s. All I could do was just go to work, spend myself, come home, and just pay my bills over and over and over. And there came a point where, is this all there is? I mean,
Yeah.
granted, the simple pleasures exist there. I have a family. I have a great wife. We have a good relationship. We have kids. I have a roof over my head. I'm not in the coal mines like my son. I have a lot to
Yeah.
be grateful for. But is that all that my potential on this earth was for?
Mm.
Okay. Is that all it was for? Just to earn a living and not get ahead. And I just felt a call to not be controlled by the chase for a dollar. I felt like that was a constraint.
Mm.
Not that I wanted wealth. I don't care about big houses and wealth. I really wanted freedom,
Yeah.
to choose and to do things that I felt were the content of my days. I think that was my big
Mm.
desire. I wanted to control the
Just a
content of
choice.
my days. And that's what wealth will give you. Like, you'll still have the same challenges in life. I've been on both sides of the track. You're going to have a lot of the same game. I mean, but you have a choose. You can choose the content of your days when you have a certain amount of freedom. That's what it was about to me.
Fabulous. And one of your quotes from the start of the book is that there was never just one ingredient that led to his financial freedom. It was a way of life. And I just love that because so many authors, experts in inverted commas, that show the flashy trappings and other things that they think are attractive, they offer the magic bullet. And it's just refreshing to me the layers that this book goes into and unpacks, slowly for the reader and does it in the story form, which is fabulous. But tell us about some of the ways of life, I guess, that led to your wealth. And I know you
Yeah,
go through
100%.
some of them in the book, but I'd love for listeners
Yeah,
to hear a few.
absolutely. And it's a, I just noticed that you're asking the hard questions, Jared, and and that's great. It's great because one of the frustrations when I would get on to speaking with people after a book is that you'll get the question, well, what's the one secret? What's the big one? It's like, no, and I was tripping over that question nonstop, even though I wrote a book. And they keep on putting me on the spot. What's the one thing? What should I tell my readers? No, it's a way of life. It really is. And I really always loved the quote that success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out.
Yeah.
It's a way of
Nice.
life. What are those ways of life? And people talk about morning rituals. And I have been working so hard since this book came out to try to put that way of life into the next book in a way that people can say, they can unpack it and say, this is it.
Nice.
What's the way of life? In my opinion, the way of life is certainly mental clarity. If you can't see it, Jared, in my life, if I couldn't see it, I couldn't do it. And what I mean by that is the imagination works in images. It's a secret life that nobody sees, where I would wake up in the morning and I would visualize. I don't even like the term sometimes. It gets thrown around too much in America, where you just visualize and things are supposed to come to you.
Yeah. Things like The Secret
But
have almost given it a bad name, but then people kind of leave it out of there
yeah,
and think it's not
but
important
then
at all.
exactly? But then who doesn't mentally rehearse before a sporting event? And so you try to see things, you try to visualize things. That's part of life. So yeah, can you see it? I can never see it unless I can either write diagrams. First of all, clarity. Second of all, let's talk about that subconscious stuff that you're talking about, the hypnosis and stuff like that. However you do it, you got to do it. You got to control that big invisible force within you, or else you're going to be at odds with yourself. You have, in my opinion, you have to get the body, mind, and soul aligned. And sometimes that means you again, clarity. So much mental preparation before the event of life. Sometimes I think that people will go through a lot of things in the morning, all these rituals, and then they won't get to put in the hours. Now you do have to put in the hours, and all these other things are just prep for the game. It's not the game. Visualizing, it's important, but it's not the game. Working on your mindset, it's important, but it's not the game.
And in the book, you talk
priorities.
about those impact hours and just how important
100%.
they are. So what is an impact hour?
So let's say in my own life, okay, after you get your head straight and you really work on your mind, and these things are just to empower you to get into days and use your days. And I want people to understand that it's not always about an impact hour is effective time use. What is your goal? What moves you ahead? You got to get clear on that, and you got to give time to that. So many of us, I see, going through all these rituals, but then they work a full-time job. They come home, they eat a big dinner, and they watch TV and go to bed. Well, what happened that day? I mean, you're certainly living a responsible life, but is that moving you closer towards your goal? Where's the impact hours there? In your free time, in your work job? An impact hour to me is a building block, day after day after day. And the more you give, the more you get. That's where the work is. It's the work of earning whatever your well-chosen goal would be. It doesn't have to be wealth, but I can tell you one thing: if you don't give your hours, you don't use your potential. So that's what a day looks like. What I think sometimes people see is that, oh my gosh, you're working so hard, and I'm saying, no, I'm not. I'm just using my time here. I'm not digging ditches. I'm just, while you're raking your yard, we have to do those kind of things. I happen to be doing other things. My sacrifice was that I had to be intent day after day, calm, focused, steady. It's not that big of a deal. I'm not out of breath. I'm just focused.
It's like anything,
using
you get
my
in
time.
the habit of it. And some of my team say to me, oh, what did you do on the weekend? And yes, I had recreational time and time with my family and time to enjoy things. But when I was working out at the gym, I was listening to that audio book And when I was, you can get a whole university degree in your spare time, just from hours that you might otherwise be just wasting. So,
Oh, I love you. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. Oh, that's so fantastic. Music to my ears. So many people don't. I see it all the time. I always did. I needed to.
Yeah.
I always say that maybe that was because I had bigger goals and I just needed to stretch myself and I needed to expand who I was. So I'm always doing those sorts of things. Sure, you don't need that stuff if you don't have stretch goals. So if you do,
now,
however, have a stretch goal.
A day goes by and I actually feel, if I haven't grown or learnt something or furthered myself, I feel like, it hasn't been a great day. So that's the other side of it when it becomes a habit.
Yeah. I think I really feel like when you get in touch with what your full potential starts to feel like I take it to that level.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And it's supposed to be. Okay. Like we're not supposed to be removed from people will say, well, that looks like work. Well, it looks like your full potential is what it looks like to me. So if you're working, you're putting garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. Working out.
A lot of people say to me,
Jared,
I'm too busy to create wealth. Does it come down to the choice of where you put those hours, or what do you say to someone that is letting that busyness get in the way?
I would say that so much of what we focus on is what we do. But I think the first step of wealth is to focus on the don'ts. I think the don'ts take up a lot of time in our society. In my book coming up, let's say we have wealthy do's, things you're supposed to, that to do. And there's wealthy don'ts. Well, what's the wealthy don'ts? Well, okay. What are you doing? Is it social media? What's the vices? What are your vices? There are a lot of vices that will just take your time, claim your time, money, and your potential if you don't watch out for them. Shut it down. Social media, there's going to be some good recreations. You may have to give up things like that you have to make choices. It's called sacrifice, but you're sacrificing something you want now for something you want most. And that room is there, but you've got to eliminate devices. If somebody's sitting around drinking, that takes up a lot of time.
Yeah. And then there's the next day when you're at your best too.
Yeah.
And you do touch on
absolutely
giving up of alcohol in the book, actually, don't you? And just not being your best self for your children. So that has been playing back to me even lately. When I first read it in your book, I was like, no way. I enjoy it too much. And now I'm down to maybe one tiny whiskey a week. And even when I have it, I'm like, do I even really need this?
Hey, man, I'm not preaching. I'm not preaching.
What message is it giving
I'm
my
not
daughter?
Preaching.
So.
Yeah. Listen,
but everyone can choose
moderation.
Absolutely.
I've
got my staff Christmas party tomorrow, and I'm going to have a few then, so I'll be making up for it.
Well, I want it to be known that I am certainly not judging, nor do I give a care what people do. I'm just trying to explain in my own life why I gave it up when my kids were watching me. And I always say that I just don't think I'm smart enough to succeed with different drugs in my head. People are better than me. I'm not smart enough. So I leave it at that. I don't drink.
Other than giving up of the alcohol, what were some of the other daily mental practices that you talk about earning good luck? And I just love that concept, because that's the thing that 100%. People say to others all the time too. Oh, you're so lucky.
Yeah.
What's behind that? What
Okay.
are some of the ways that you can turn luck in your favor?
Sure. So I could give an example, just as a story in my life. Let's say that at one point I wanted to buy a commercial building on a busy thoroughfare in my hometown to move my chiropractic clinic over. And so what's the process? What do I go through every time? Every time I do it, I go through this process of what does it look like? I try to get it so clear in my mind. I focus completely on this goal. I just spend time, 10 minutes every day, and then you get on with your life. You get your head straight. But if there's just something, Jared, that every time I've done this, that I see coincidences show up that have always made me wonder. I'm always an agnostic. Okay, I don't know, but here's what I observe. Okay, let's say when my mind gets on that, and I get into a feeling, and I can experience that one becoming mine, odd things start to happen. Okay. And in this case, there was one person who was totally against us. He was on the board. He carried a lot of heavy weight. Well, okay, he was against me. I mean, I could kiss butt with the best of them in real estate, but he wasn't coming around to my way of thinking. And okay, what do I do? I just keep on focusing and feeling and experiencing that. That's just how what I've learned to do in my life. So we have this one big finale. The board is coming together, the zoning board. Everybody's going to decide whether or not all of my improvements can happen on this road that I'm talking about, paving, all this signs by the road, things that were just no. They're a no by the board. Okay. Well, due to a bunch of circumstances on that particular night, that man could not make it to the meeting.
Mm.
And you'll say, "Wow, that's pretty lucky. That's a good coincidence." And I just wanted to speak up for those coincidences in my life in this book because I think so many people will back off of that because it can sound a little spiritual. It'll sound a little bit maybe mythical. And all I know is I would never not do that. And I have always seen
It's obviously
things I
played a
can't
pretty key role,
explain.
hasn't it? So you can't leave it out.
Jared, things I can't explain happen. That's all. And I can tell you that they happen enough, and there's stories of it in my book nonstop. I don't claim to say, listen, you have to follow a religion, you have to do this or that. But I did want to speak for those things and say, I stand by this, that I don't know what's going on. I'm not that smart, but here's what happened. And here's what happened. And here's what happened. I wanted 3 months off. I got a break and I got 3 months off. These kind of things happen. Okay. And I just didn't want that left unsaid to my son or to eventually, once I published it to the world, I guess. So yeah, that's what putting my mind on it, creating luck looks like to me. Sure.
Well, take us through, in your book, you talk about the wealth seasons, and you touched on then when you're in your 20s where, pretty much survival was the core focus. And you have a few characters in your book as well. One of them is actually named Jared, which is not the only reason why I love your book. But, he's the sloppy guy that's not motivated, living at home at age 30 or whatever he is.
I'm sorry about that, Jared. When I was coming on this, I was thinking about that. Your name is Jared.
Yeah. So that's motivating for me not to end up that way. But I think the wealthy gardener actually says some things to Jared in the book about the wealth seasons, and take us through them, because it almost takes the pressure off a bit and just allows you to make the most of the season you're in.
100%. And if you can't relax a little, you're just not going to enjoy the process,
exactly.
No matter what. I guarantee you that I would say that I was too much in a rush, and I had to always pull myself back. And
the impatience, God, it's almost like I cost myself so much by being so impatient. And it's easy when you 100%. Get to the other side and look back. But in the moment,
I promise you,
that burning desire, you can almost burn up people with impatience. So.
You're telling my story. Here I am. I'm 57 years old. And I can tell you that my great regret is that I was impatient the whole way. You don't have, it doesn't speed things up. You'll hear a lot of people talk about how this burning desire, you got to speed it up. You got to have it. That's not true. You can be just as effective calmly. So it's like you're still going to do the things you got to do. You're not going to speed things up by being crazy and being agitated. It's about focus.
And in my case as well, I was so busy, actively renovating properties and developing properties and selling properties and joint venturing with people and turning so much over. Perhaps if I'd just, in my case, held more quality properties and not been so impatient, I would be a lot further ahead too. So,
the 20s, you're basically learning how to figure it out for yourself and how it works economically in the world. There's no free lunch. You're going to learn that in your 20s. So you're learning a lot about money, learning about yourself as well. So you get yourself in the right situations where you can actually thrive. I'd say the 30 to 60 is where you're going to do a lot of your life work, a lot of your savings, in terms of the seasons of life. From 30 to 60, it's just you plow forward, you gain more and more responsibilities. You're going to, pick up family. You're going to have to learn how to navigate that with your ambition because, nobody wants to have an unfulfilled family life along with it. And, if you learn how to bring your family and partner with them into your venture, and I don't mean having them in your houses or having them in your business, but just having them in your life and in your communication, being authentic with them, tell them what your fears are, having that interaction. You're going to learn a lot of that kind of stuff in your 30s to 60s. You're going to see your kids grow up. And meanwhile, it's just about steady progress. 60 and beyond, I'm not there yet, but I can tell you that it looks like freedom if you do it right. And if you do freedom right, it can get you into a lot more meaning. You can find things that fulfill you. You can find simple pleasures because the content of your day isn't so controlled. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to sit around and become soft. It means that you can actually appreciate a walk in the woods because you have that. The content that surrounds you, it changes if you have freedom, if you have wealth. If you don't, you're going to work until you're dead. You're going to work the whole way. I think that's what people always ask, is a sacrifice worth it? I said, well, which sacrifice are you talking about? Because you watched a lot of TV and you sacrificed your future. I didn't watch TV. I sacrificed the TV and I got my freedom. So what are we talking about here? What sacrifice? Which end are we talking about? I sacrificed the front end. Oh man, I never want to be sacrificing the back end. That's for sure. When you get older. So
was all of that
I
sacrifice
think
on
that's
the front end worth it for you, John?
Well, what did I sacrifice, Jared? When you think about it. Okay, so I think about that. What did I sacrifice? I sacrificed a lot of TV. I sacrificed golf. I did TV and golf. What else did I sacrifice? I had time with my family. I sacrificed a lot of hangovers.
You still kept the family as a core piece, because many people go too far into their work and then wake up with a divorce at 40 or 50.
Yeah. Read a book once on that. They said number one thing you can do to end up wealthy is not get divorced.
Not lose 50%. We laugh, but it is so true.
Oh, 100%. And not the emotional anguish people go through with that just sucks it out of you. You can't even work at that point. But what did I sacrifice? The good things I sacrificed were I like playing basketball. I did the golfing. I sacrificed some sunny days there. I sacrificed some hangovers that other people had, a lot of drinking. What else did I sacrifice? Nothing. TV and some good entertainments. So I don't see it as that,
But the wonderful thing about when you're going into those first seasons is that it's an adventure and it's a lot of fun too, if you're not just sitting on the couch watching TV. So,
it was a relief. It's a relief. To be honest with you, whenever you have a clear goal and you're pursuing it, that to me was, oh, thank God. It feels so much better than not knowing what to do in my life. Yeah, absolutely. You do. There's an energy to progress that I think people underestimate until they feel it. It's like exercising. You got to get to the point where you start getting in shape to feel good from exercise. So I think a lot of people stop because they don't get there.
Get that feeling, And in the book, you talk about the 5-year crusades, and sort of, I kind of picture these crusades making up the seasons as you go. And I love the time period of 5 years, because I struggle to think often beyond that too. And it's just a nice chunk of time to organize my clarity and my thinking and
100%, Jared. I've wasted a lot of time in my life thinking beyond it. Okay. Because here's the thing. Yes, go ahead and set up your 30-year plan. I don't care. Do it. But I promise you, in 5 years, you're going to be a whole new person, whole new set of circumstances. People are going to be dead around you. You're going to not have people around you. Your jobs are going to change. Everything's going to change around you every 5 years.
Yeah, you might have a family. You're thinking entirely different.
100%.
Next chapter.
So I like to say to keep things open. 5 years is enough. It's enough time to change everything. However, it's also a time where it might be time for some reflection, because you're going to be a new person. You always are. Go back 5 years, and what you're doing now is usually impossible in your mind 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, I'm doing this now. When did you start your podcasting? When did you start that?
2 years ago.
Okay. So 5 years ago, you might not have seen that, right? When did you start your real estate business?
14 years ago now.
14? So can you imagine taking yourself back 15 years and saying what's possible in your life? It's a bad spot to say.
Come up with it. And I pinched myself and said to my wife today, like, I interviewed one of our other authors from Australia, who's one of the biggest selling authors in Australia today as well. And so I was so buzzed out that I'm getting to meet and interview my 2 favorite authors in a single day. And I was saying to my wife, the 16-year-old that started out on this journey in reading Rich Dad
Yeah.
Poor Dad could never have imagined that I'd be doing that in a single day, So,
And that's the case for 5-year goals.
yeah.
Because if, say, 15 years ago, you can only go out about 5 years and you're lucky to get that one, let alone leapfrogging over that one, then the next 5, then the next 5. You can't even think about it. So just stick to here, make it, it's exactly the point. Everything's impossible if you think too far. But if you stick within smaller increments and then keep on choosing up, all of a sudden you start to see impossibilities vanish.
Did I see on your website or somewhere online that you might be working on another book to cover that in depth? Is that right? Am I getting a
Jared,
scoop?
No, you're definitely, the main character from this book. I look at the Wealthy Gardener is the Godfather 1 movie, right?
Ah, yes.
I look at this next one as the Godfather 2, and it has to live up to it. But I would say that the main character, Jimmy, who's going to be going back to the boys, the reform boys, it's a lot of story about him. And he doesn't always handle the responsibilities of wealth at 22 as well as he should have. So there's a whole new level of getting wealthy and staying wealthy, and he's learning that real hard.
Awesome.
Is it? Yeah, it's going to be he has a class called Behavioral Wealthology. He teaches at the prison, and that is the sum of small efforts day in and day out. No doubt about it, in order to reach impossible goals. And the word impossible is important because these kids coming out of a reform system in the United States, 70% of them return to prison in 5 years. So it's not even possible for them to think of getting ahead. They have to just try to stay free and not cheat and not go back to jail. And so he's in a position of trying to help them, disadvantaged youths, get it together. Because he came from the same prison. So that's the idea of the story.
Yeah,
sure.
Cool. No, I can't wait.
And I've hit my head. Been hitting my head off a wall for 3 years on this story. You see the Wealthy Gardener. I'm honored and humbled that you appreciate it. It always comes with a lot of just pain. I almost kill myself. Yeah, I kill myself in these books because I just can't quite get them right. So
you touched on a few little keys in there, but how do we create change when you're starting out, especially when that goal can seem so big? And I think you just might have let the secret out then of breaking it down into small daily practices that may not even seem like much, but when you get momentum, it's like a snowball down a big mountain. At the start it's a few snowflakes and
100%.
keep doing the same thing and building that momentum and
day by day, Jared, no doubt about it. But here's the game of it, man. Society is indifferent. Okay, it doesn't care if you win or lose. It's not against you. It's not for you. It's just there. In society, there are vices to choose and there are virtues to choose. Vices, to me, look like a lot of wasting time or using time. It's always a game of that sort of thing. It's about what you feed your mind, what you don't feed your mind. It's all about, do you control your subconscious mind or do you let it control you? It's so much of that. It's intentionality. It's choosing short term or long term. What tastes good today or what feels good today or what's better for you long term. What you want now versus what you want most. All of that's playing out in society. And every day there's choices like that. In the meantime, the challenge of it all is you're doing everything right. You're doing everything right. You're doing everything right. And damn it, you just don't see.
Yeah, it's not showing up yet.
The oak tree grows so slowly in days, but it grows a lot in 5 years. And that's the thing that's the hardest part of mentality when you're doing this stuff. You have to keep doing what you know is right without seeing it. So how do we track our efforts? How do we track our progress? How do we track our effectiveness, our impact? That's really important. Because the tree, if you stare at that oak tree, it grows a lot in 5 years, but not even, it's unobservable in a month. And so often is our success the same way, but we just got to stay at it.
Awesome. So in the book, you also talk about discontentment. I related to that one a lot. Tell us, how can that be a fuel for your fire, so to speak, or how can you use that discontentment in a positive way?
Constructive discontentment.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, without discontentment, Jared, we'd all be using outhouses. I think it gets a bad name. Like we should accept what is and
Yeah.
settle for it. It's like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Maybe we'll oftentimes hear that by pious preaching people. Accept what is. Well, wait a minute. Maybe God put some potential in you, and you're not quite fulfilling it, and maybe that's why you're discontented. Maybe that desire is a good thing. It's positive. I believe in discontentment. I also believe in enough. It's there's always I'll get interviewed on a podcast and people will say, well, why didn't you keep going further? Like I have 110 rentals. I think that it's really important to know where your enough is and to stop and to say, okay, now this is my next 5 years. So it is important to know where your enough is. Discontentment is just like financial fear. People say, oh, well, don't think about fears. Don't think about fears. Are you kidding me? People get run over by cars not thinking about fears. And so we are definitely pulled by positive emotions, and we are also pulled to avoid insecurities, things that are threats to our existence, discontentments that don't fit our way of believing. That's not a problem. That's called a human being seeking growth. That's all good. Most of the people that are preaching to you against that are people who are stuck, and they're quite frankly not comfortable with your amount of effort. It doesn't make them feel too good when they're not working as hard as you. So
it's almost like they've given up and they think that your discontentment's wrong.
Here's what I understand for sure is that I don't need people to understand me who aren't working hard. When you're trying to explain yourself to them, just stop and get back, move somewhere else. You can't. You'll never change them. But that's what I know for sure.
And you also talk about self-mastery, and it's something that I really resounded with as well in the book. Tell us about how you think about self-mastery and how it relates to wealth and that journey that we all go on.
You know what? Well, I've got this question before, and I have done such pitiful, terrible, embarrassing, humiliating explanations of this. What my idea of self-mastery is.
Been playing around in your head since.
Good God, I'm terrible explaining what I mean by this. Okay, but here's the thing. I used to play sports, and I bring it back to this, right? When I'm young. And if you walk onto a sporting event, if anybody who's gotten this state where you will control this game because you are in command of it. You're just going to score 30 points in a basketball game. Get out of my way. This is happening today. I'm sorry. This is not your day. This is my day. And when you get in that kind of a mode, it's an invincible feeling. I love it. Now I'm in charge of my emotions. People call it the flow state. But now, how does that translate into real life? Into real life, to me,
I just love that.
About.
I still play basketball twice a week, and I want to keep playing.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Like even this week, we were down by 3. There's 5 minutes to go. It's that absolute belief in all of us. We're not going to lose this game. And that's
what you see around you.
Decision.
It's will. It's more than intellect. It's way bigger than intellect. It's emotional. And that's what I was getting to. Now, that's easy to come to. We'll all say that on a sporting event. We get it. How does that play into an 8-hour day at your job in the middle of a week? To me, Jared, I had to keep my it's emotional. To me, it's on the wellness wheel. You talk about the different parts of your life. It's emotional. I had to keep my emotions at a high level, meaning calm but confident. Okay. All day long. Despite the fact that it looks like I'm losing and I'm down by 3 and all odds are against me.
Yeah.
And maybe if I let myself fall into fear, I would. But no, that's not the way you play in the fourth quarter when you're down by 15 points. No, it's my job to keep myself stable, up. And that's what I mean by self-mastery. To me, is an emotional state. I can get there by exercise. I get there through biology. Food, exercise, posture, things like that have started for me. Then you get to the point where you control that invisible subconscious mind of yours because it controls more of us than we want to know. That shadow work is important. But to me, self-mastery is all about feeling confident despite everything I see. It's my job to feel confident. And confidence is an emotion. It's all emotional.
Awesome. And one of the things I see many investors struggle with, and that's why I keep bringing it up in a lot of my podcasts, and it's funny the common thread that this weaves through all of us that have made wealth and become financially free is the importance of saving. And I love how you talk about saving urgently in your book.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
why do you think everyone doesn't do it when, when it's so logical that in order to invest, in order to get ahead, we need to be able to save, yet
Yeah.
most people don't do it, and most people don't save urgently like you talk about it.
I think that it comes down to what we want now versus what we say we want.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. And, keep in mind that in society, spenders are rewarded by social status. So we get reward from this. If we buy, there's the bigs. Let's talk about the bigs. The house, the cars, the food, the clothes, those are the bigs. We get rewarded. People look up to us. I mean, if you have a lot of renters, you realize that there's a lot of people that can show up with a really nice car, look great, speak well,
Yep.
and their finances are a mess.
Yeah, we see it
Yeah.
day in, day out with what we do.
Sure.
Yep.
Social status. So people they go to they get esteem from peers. Society showers you with affection if you spend and look good. Number two, it's just easier. Quite frankly, it's just like eating a dessert, or it's you do the thing that feels good, as opposed to the thing that might be the best long-term idea.
I guess
there are
that's why
books
there
out
is
there
so
that-
many parallels between being healthy with your eating and being disciplined with your money.
100%. I mean, come on, it's about devices. It's the things that feel good and taste good. I always say that I don't believe in a kind God, because God made ice cream taste good and broccoli taste like broccoli. And it's like, you always have these choices every day of your life to eat broccoli or ice cream. You can spend or not spend. There are books that will tell you that we are so bad at impulsive behavior that it's just better to get that money off the books. Automatic savings plans, get it out of there, and then you have a forced amount of money that you almost like an allowance that you're allowed to spend. I mean, so you can make that decision in your strong state. The problem is in our weak state, we don't have the same amount of willpower. And so all of a sudden, these little $100 adds up to this. Well, where the hell did my money all go? Nobody knows. Where the hell did my time all go? Nobody knows. All I know is I have no money in my time, and that's going to be my excuse now, because now I'm 35 years old. I'm going to throw my age on it too. Let's throw that as an excuse. But the next 5 years are coming. Wait a minute. The next 5 years are coming. You have a choice to make those your best years, the big years of your life. But you got to get it straight in your head. You got to not spend its time, its money, its potential. That's all you got. There's nothing else. You can spend time, money, potential, or you can use time, money, potential. There is nothing else.
I love it. Yeah. That's it in its simplicity, isn't it?
Well, I don't see where it's wrong. I've thought about it.
And one of the things I always like
I
to
live-
do is, before I had money, I developed really great habits. So when I got it, I just continued. And
Sure.
I like to think about, especially for my listeners, like, what is financial freedom going to look like after? Because everyone focuses so much on the getting there, but then what? What is it for you, John? And is that the pinnacle of climbing the mountain? Is there more
it's the
once you
start.
get up to that first peak?
Well, I would say this, Jared. If your goal is to sit on a beach, you don't have the motivation inherent in that goal to get there. It's not going to work. That's just not a motivating goal. No, financial freedom is the start, and it's the start of whatever. I'll tell you, for some people, it's the start of a lot of bad habits. Not everybody's ready for it.
Yeah.
There's too much freedom. Not everybody can handle that. Now, it can be the start of the best things of your life. You can have time now, let's say, to serve in your own way. Who are you? Have you figured this out? What is the gift you're going to give to society? Not because you're a saint, but because this makes you feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things that you can do in retirement. That's the kind of things you can do with financial freedom. You can sit here and meet people on your podcast because you put in efforts in the past. Guess what? If you're slaving because you spent all your money, you're somewhere in a factory right now. You're not doing what you're doing. I appreciate the fact that you're staying up at nighttime. It's like 9:30-ish or something your time right now. It's early in the morning my time right now. You have content choices. I think that's the best thing you can do with the freedom. Me, I find a torture and a fulfillment in writing. And that's there's something to that. People say, well, you find the torture you can endure, the hard work that you can endure. That's kind of what you're looking for in life. Forget about the rainbow and the passion. It just feels right and you're satisfied. I feel satisfied there, but I can't write if I'm just slaving every day chasing a dollar. I'm just not smart enough to do both. So that's what freedom is, the start of purpose, but purpose gets you freedom. So it's individualistic. Everybody has their own purpose, I think.
And I guess when you wrote The Wealthy Gardener, it was, your lessons to your son. Like you've mentioned that
Yeah.
you're writing this next book. Who are you writing this one for?
I have to, okay, so perfect question again. I mean, I could just tell you've been through it. I admire you for the ways you ask the questions, because here, I'm 57 and you've got to figure out what I'm going through right now. So who am I writing for? I feel like there's some inner city kids that I know who are good and hungry. And I look at them as part of out of all of the feedback I've gotten from my book, which was translated into, 10 languages and it hit number 46 worldwide and all this kind of stuff. I'll get like a Nobel laureate and I'll get a couple prisoners give me feedback. Who really I love the prisoners. I love them. They write and they talk about their hope in the future. So that's who I'm writing it for. It's a fictitious story, but I do feel the need of hunger. And these people they just want to get ahead. I don't think everybody wants wealth. I think a lot of people just want to not be fearful. They don't want to have money worries. And then they want to get on with their life. I'm writing it for that. I think there's a 22-year-old in my own life, my past self, that really didn't know what was coming. So I went through a lot of pain. And I guess I'm still trying to figure that out, use that so that the other people won't go through that same pain, right?
Well, that's
Man,
why
it didn't have to be this long for me.
Go and mentor teenagers as well. It's like I went through so much pain and difficulty trying to find the path, and just feel like if I can at least create a context and help them find theirs earlier, that's what keeps me coming back to that. So
100%. Now you're talking about retirement stuff. So what are you going to do in retirement? Well, I guarantee if you're going to be happy, you're going to find some sort of a service, a purpose. I don't even have to go into it. Human beings are wired to be tribal. You just have, I'm not sure why we are, but we are. You're not quite happy unless you're serving something. Your fulfillment will be lost if you're just thinking about yourself only. And so as the most selfish thing you can do, you can serve others in retirement in a way that really, really fulfills you.
Well, I'm hoping that what we've chatted about today will certainly help improve other people's lives that are listening. And I think that's a really great place to end things on. And this is coming out just before New Year's. So a great time, if anyone hasn't read The Wealthy Gardener, to check out the links in the show notes. You can buy it in all the major places. And I love the audiobook version on Audible personally. And because, you can get it in and around all those other things that you're doing in life. You can really work up some impact hours there. And what a great time of year to be doing some working on yourself as well. So check out the book. Anything finally to add, John? It's been such a privilege and pleasure to have you on, and really appreciate you taking the time.
I'm impressed by you. I told you on the start of the show that I really love my Australia publisher, and I've had nothing but positive. I'm starting to have nothing but positive experiences with the Australian crowd. So you're fitting right in. I appreciate it, Jared. And sorry for writing such a character named Jared in my book. We didn't quite work out.
Anti-self.
No, but you're certainly the opposite of that. So thank you for having me on your show.
Appreciate it. Just a reminder that the information discussed in this podcast is general in nature, as we don't know your specific situation. You should always seek professional advice before taking any action. For free market reports on your suburbs of interest and other helpful resources to grow your wealth, make sure you join my property investor update at investorsedge.com.au/join. And finally, make sure you're a member of our Perth Property Investment Facebook group to be part of the conversation with other like-minded investors, get help to your questions, and get a feel for what's going on out there in the market. I'll see you in the group.